I gave you my love, I tell you what I do, I'd expect a whole lot of love out of you. You got to treat me good, and I'll be good to you. There's a whole lot of things you and I could do, baby.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I hope you're having a great weekend. Started out kind of at Dante Hall, that's Chicago's own Dante Hall, with a remake of Al Green's Simply Beautiful. And it was kind of sounding like it was kind of dragging to me. And, it's a Sunday fun day. I don't want to start off dragging today. I'm dragging enough, okay? I'm trying to keep doing it till I can make it. A bit under the weather, anything that goes on with my voice, I get nervous about. And this weather is so crazy. So, of course, I got sinuses, cold combination. According to my sister, who's a health educator, she says other things, but we're not going to claim that. But anyway, I just wanted to welcome you to Intellectual Radio's Voices of Change. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. And I see that there's someone that is saying something to me. Yeah, I see you too. This is Miss Shumpert, Carolyn Shumpert. It's her birthday today. I got to give her a birthday shout out. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know there's so many other things you can be doing right now, but thank you. I appreciate it. My guest this week is Crista Noel. She is not only a filmmaker, she's a filmmaker, which is a big enough deal, but she also started an organization, Women All Points Bulletin. You've got to hear about this. They're doing fantastic things, and she's doing it on an international scale, and you're going to have to hear about it. The scripture for today is from Proverbs 18:16. And it goes, "A man's gifts makes room for him and brings him before great men." Think about how far those gifts can go. And you see it happening over and over and over again with someone that has gifts. When you have these great gifts, he does position you in front of great men. And you'll, in fact, be one of those great men or great women. But let me tell you about my guest today, because I'm going to bring her on because there's so many things I want to ask her. I just want to hear all about the initiative. I want to hear, of course, about the film, being involved with film myself at one time. That intrigues me. But this organization that she has, Women All Points Bulletin, and her story. Well, I'm going to read you a little bit about her bio and bring her on the set. Crista Noel is a proud Africana citizen of Chicago, Illinois, the greatest American city founded by an African businessman. Her family migrated from Tennessee during the first wave into Chicago, and she can trace her American family roots back over 200 years. Hope I remember to ask her about that. She graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in education and social policy and worked as a manager for Fortune 100 and 500 companies until she was attacked by a police officer in Westchester, Illinois on January 1st, 2009. After being maliciously prosecuted by the officer and still traumatized by the attack, she studied the criminal justice system and researched police violence against women. Together with Beverly Wilson Ellison Sr., she founded Women's All Points Bulletin, WAPB, a nonprofit organization created by women for women who have been victimized by violence during policing encounters. Ms. Noel is a certified practitioner of oversight by the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, previous member of the Midwest Coalition for Human Rights and the U.S. Human Rights Network, graduate of the Illinois Attorney General's Victim Assistance Academy, an alumni of the Evanston Police Civilian Police Academy, certified by the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault, recipient of the Chicago Task Force on Violence Against Girls and Young Women Project, 2014 Women Heroines Award, 2014 Urban Justice Center, Human Rights Institute Fellow, and 2022 Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, Community Justice, and Civil Rights Clinic Boyd Barnett Fellow. Miss Noel works internationally on issues involving police violence against women and have written several shadow reports submitted to the United Nations treaty bodies and special mechanisms. The WAPB's most recent report, Blood at the Root Violence by the State, asked the UN Permanent Forum of People of African Descent to investigate the COINTELPRO assassinations, as well as the torture and murder, oh, this will be interesting too, of Billie Holiday by the US federal government. The WAPB made its first foray into film during the COVID pandemic. Poetic Justice is a poetry slam in memory of Rekia Boyd, the young Black woman shot and killed by a police detective in 2012. In 2020, the WAPB decided to film the slam and document its involvement in the movement against police violence in Chicago. Considered docu-art, the film lifts performances and interviews of Rakia's family members and artists from Good Kids, Mad City, and features the rising star, Rick Wilson. Wow. Help me welcome Chris Noel. That was a lot. That is a lot. Oh my gosh, that is a lot. Where do we begin? You know, it's ironic because before I got this little issue, this respiratory thing, we're gonna be meeting at the studio, and the studio is in Westchester.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I didn't realize. I didn't realize until I was reading the bio. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, if anything I ask you and you'd rather not talk about, there's not a problem. Just let me know. But tell me what happened on that day in 2009.
Oh, okay. So I tend to put that on the back burner, but yeah, my friend had got stopped for speeding, and as what was happening a little bit back then, where backup was the one that you had to worry about, not necessarily the cop that stopped you. I was sitting in front of her. We were going to Wisconsin to hang out with friends, and she got stopped for speeding. And for some reason, the backup cop decided that he was going to pretty much, harass me. I never forget. He asked, "May I help you?" And I'm old. I remember when "May I help you" meant, why are you in the store,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why are you here? Um, and it just turned into, a basic, I was fighting legally and he was being silly. And he followed me. He told me to drive away, and then he followed me and blocked me in the lot. And I'm trusting cops at this point because I didn't have any reason not to trust them at this point. Um, but, I knew about, Rodney King. So that, although it was not in the back of my mind at the point of the attack, it was in the back of my mind. It was actually right in the front. Um, but anyway, so he didn't turn on his lights or anything, so I didn't know exactly what he was doing. So I got out of the car, and he was sitting in the car, and I was just asking him, are you writing a ticket? What are you doing? Because I wanted to get out of the lot, because I had turned into the lot and I was following my friend. And I was like, well, I need to get out the lot. And if you're sitting your car there, I'm not going to drive towards a police officer, right? So you either have to, like get out of your car and come over to me and write a ticket, or you have to move, you know. Um, and I ended up being outside his door. And he just said, that's it, came storming out of his car. And next thing I know, I saw a fist in my face. And I ducked, and we were, in this struggle. And I could feel him trying to push me down, like get me on the ground. And that's the Rodney King part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I said to myself, if he gets you on the ground, he's going to kill you. and that's the way you feel when someone is attacking you, that, it's a life or death situation, right? And we happened to be sliding along the ground because there was a pothole, and you know how gravel gets on the ground around the pothole. So I had on these cross trainers, and we were just sliding along the ground, and when my feet finally stuck, I just popped up and screamed, I'm not resisting arrest, I'm not resisting arrest. At which point he picked me up and threw me onto the car, and and then arrested me, and told everyone that I had bumped my breast into him and started to punch him in his face and kick him. And I actually went to court with a felony charge of aggravated battery,
That's a
and
felony?
uh-huh, and a misdemeanor of resisting arrest. And I couldn't get rid of the resisting, because the resisting, even if it's an unlawful arrest, you can be convicted of resisting arrest, which is actually a constitutional violation, right? But the police, some kind of way, convinced everyone that even if the arrest was unlawful, you could be convicted of resisting arrest. Um, so I, I tried to appeal it. Judges started saying different things and lying and saying that I chest bumped him, even though the court said I didn't. There's something called the trier of fact, and that's usually the first judge um, that the case comes before. They're the trier of facts. And he said he wasn't credible, and it didn't happen. And I went on through court, and I just had judge after judge say that it happened. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever experienced. And that's when I realized how, the criminal justice system is, first, misogynistic. Secondly, it just loves criminalizing Black people for talking. And it's just racist. So,
Was that
you
was that
know,
I got a question. Since you were
yeah.
stopped in Westchester and that was out of city of Chicago jurisdiction, I'd imagine. Were those Westchester police?
Oh, it was Westchester, and remember, I wasn't stopped.
Okay, you weren't stopped. That's right,
Mm-mm,
you weren't stopped. You were
mm-mm,
actually
mhm.
how did
I was sitting waiting for my friend to get her ticket, and it turned into that. And that just shows you how police officers can escalate. And so I immediately came home and started writing politicians, and said that I wasn't going to let this happen. At that time, you weren't innocent. There was always something that you did in
Mhm.
2009, right? So people would say to you, what did you do? you know, they don't say that anymore,
Right,
right?
right,
They
yeah.
don't blame, yeah, they don't blame the victim. And I'm glad that I'm a part of them stopping that, right? And that is one of the things that I wanted stopped, right? That the victim was blamed, and that you understood that, cops were bad guys, you know, and have the power to put you in prison
Oh yeah,
just
the power.
on,
Yeah.
yeah, the power to put you in prison just on what they say, because everybody's going to believe them, so we started the organization. um I found out about Beverly, almost same thing. She's at a stop sign, and the cop, and her have a stare down, and he swings around behind her. That's something that, for those who are listening, what you need to understand is that when you're driving by them and they swing around and come after you, expect something bad. Okay. That is the first sign that a cop is out of control. right. So he swung around behind her, and next thing you know, he's snatching her out of the car and throwing her on hood too. So we met through a friend of mine at the job at the time, and
Mhm.
I was supporting her. So it was the first foray into the organization, and it was figuring out what the charges were, because she had a disorderly conduct, and they kept taking her in criminal court. But disorderly can also be an ordinance,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to look it up, and we found out that hers was an ordinance, and that's why she was bouncing back and forth from criminal to traffic court. And she did that for 2 years. They bounced her back and forth between criminal and traffic court. So what happened was we were waiting on the witness, and there was a very young woman next to me who had her hands in her head in her hands because she just couldn't understand what was happening. At the time, I was 49 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and this girl must have been 17, 18,
Oh, geez.
maybe,
A baby.
maybe. And I heard her lawyer say, yeah, I said to the judge, yeah, she left the scene of an accident in an ambulance. And I just said, oh my God, they got this baby in court and she doesn't know what's going on. And it was at that moment that I said, you know what? You're 49 years old. You can handle this much better than she can.
Wow.
But there needs to be an organization out there that women can go to when they're in these situations, that will help them, if nothing else, be support. Because she had no one. Her mom wasn't there. I didn't see any family. It was just the lawyer, and he wasn't doing what she needed. Right? She just needed somebody to really tell her what was going on, and support her through it. And sometimes you got to jump on lawyers too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They get so entrenched in the system that it's not that it's not that it's funny to them. It's just that they don't understand the toll it takes on you, to be in a situation where you could go to prison, over something so arbitrary, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we created the organization, and it's been now 14 years.
And you've been
And
doing things internationally with this organization, not just in the
oh
States.
yeah, because when we first started out, we were, when you're building an organization, you know what you want to do. We wanted to protect women victims of police violence. We know we wanted to do that because we were, and we didn't have anybody but ourselves to talk to, right? Because everybody else, first of all, I remember talking to a guy, and he was like, well, how many women are actually harmed? What is it like?
That was going to be my next line of question. I'm glad you brought that up. So keep that in the back of your mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, he was like, what is it, like 10%? I was like, 10%, dude. I came from, training where if it happened twice, it was a problem, right? That you had to solve. And you're talking about 10%, that's enough. That's enough. We have enough violence against us where we don't need this violence as well. So we created it because, we had to do this work. But the question was, how far do you go with someone? And I was an escalation manager. So, a customer would come to me and they would complain, and then they could go over my head and someone else's head, and they could go all the way up to the president. Right.
Okay.
So the question, when I came into it, I was like, well, how am I going to run this organization? And I was like, I'm going to run it the way I've been trained. You escalate, right? So we were working at the city level. Specifically, I got involved with the Midwest Coalition for Human Rights, which is Bernadine Dorn and University of Minnesota. It was Susan Gesh over at the University of Chicago. And Mary was what was Mary? I forget where Mary was from. A multi-million-dollar nonprofit. And they created the Midwest Coalition for Human Rights. And that was my first foray into international work, just understanding that it was out there and it was another level of escalation, right? So you go city, county, state, federal, International. So when we got Rakia for a client, we went to the city, we went to the county, we tried to talk to the county at the time. Uh, the hospital, what's the hospital? Stroger.
Stroger, yeah.
Stroger's, yeah, Stroger's son was
Oh,
over Cook
Ty.
County.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, we can't do anything. And then, we went
You went
federal.
to him directly?
Yeah, yeah. I spoke to him directly because I actually wanted to set up a complaint escalation that
Right,
if you get what you needed from the city, that you could go to the county,
right.
you know. And his issue was that there are so many counties that you couldn't get them all to come together, to create a county complaint board,
Hmm.
right? But there's no reason why Cook County doesn't have a police complaint board, and each county can have a police complaint board. And then you go to Illinois, the state. That can be your AG, Lisa Madigan. We went to Lisa Madigan. And then federally, we went over to the federal attorney here in Chicago. I forget what his name was. And it was crickets. So, here was international. You could take a name international. So, we took Rakia International and we wrote our first report with the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. And I think it's called Extrajudicial Killings of Africans in Chicago.
Excellent.
And it was a 3-page report. You don't have to write very much when you first go in because, you're kind of scared. You're like, yo, this is the United Nations.
Yeah, this is a big
Yeah, it's big, And I won a scholarship to go to Geneva and
Oh,
fight
yes.
for her. And we fought for her and we fought for a consent decree. I went there to get the Chicago Police Department under a consent decree. And that was 2013. And we went back 4 more times. And we got the consent decree in 2018.
Okay.
So, it's rewarding work. We just came back from there and there's a lot of good stuff that happened. I was fortunate enough to be over the women's working group
Mhm.
for the Covenant for Civil and Political Rights. And we were fighting for the UN to recognize that the United States hasn't ratified the Equal Rights Amendment, and that this is the time to do it. And so the UN actually wrote in their concluding observations that the United States needed to ratify the ERA, and also it needed to pass CEDAW, which is another treaty that is to eliminate discrimination against women.
Okay.
So we did a pretty good job
You
on
did
that.
real good job. I'm glad
Yeah.
somebody is addressing that.
So now we have to push to get the ERA passed. It only
Yeah.
needs like a couple of things, but we can get it done.
Good. You kind of mentioned when the gentleman was asking you. I'm just curious. I don't know how many, you hear this all the time about men being stopped or not even stopped, but issues with police. You don't
Yeah.
hear it that often about women. How often does it happen? Probably more so than we think.
Well, I personally believe that most of the violence that is committed by police is against women. You just don't know what it is. So we're 5% of shootings consistently. We're 5% of shootings, and we're usually getting killed as we're driving our cars or
Oh
something.
my goodness.
They're shooting us as we're driving away, like the woman in DC. Remember, she was driving her car and she ran
Yes.
into
Yeah, she
there,
ran to yeah.
shot her in the back of the head as she was driving away. And that's what they do a lot. But then also we have the in custody deaths, right? And that's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happened. Yeah, Sandra Bland
That's the
and
one I thought of, Sandra Bland, yeah.
yeah, and Irene Chavez and another young woman. There, and this is just me saying names that I remember at this point, but it happens more frequently than we think. So there are a lot of in custody deaths of women. And that could be for various reasons. There's something called shock of confinement. And that means that, you are put in jail and there's a shock that comes
Yeah,
with you being confined.
of course.
And it usually, if you're suffering from shock of confinement, you'll probably commit suicide within the first 3 days. And then most people who commit suicide in jail or in prison do it within the first 7 days. So you have that. Then you have rape. Cops rape women. As a matter of fact, as far as criminal conduct is concerned, is the second highest criminal conduct committed by cops. But that's because we don't know how many of them are beating and killing their wives, because they do that as well. So if you put beating your wives and killing your wives and your entire families along with rape and then shooting and then, oh, chases, where a lot of times we're innocent bystanding, um, cars, right? They're chasing somebody and then they
Hmm.
kill the woman. They killed a baby girl. They killed a 37-year-old mother of three. They killed a 911 operator. Um, they've killed so many women. So you even have the woman, Marquita Reed, who was in the restaurant when the off-duty cop was driving and drove through the restaurant and killed her.
Where
So
was this at? Where was that? I didn't hear about that one.
I was on 87th Street.
In Chicago?
Hmm. They
Okay.
still they still haven't taken him to court. Marquita Reed, they still have not taken him to court. That's like maybe 4 or 5, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. They still haven't taken him to court. I don't know what Kim's doing as far as that's concerned, but I believe he still works for the police department too. I think he's on like 311. That's where they put all cops. They don't, because we can't fire him because Brandon didn't put a part of the contract that he just gave him money. He didn't put in it that he should be able to fire him on the spot. So you can't fire police officers. So, they have to be fired by the police board. But now Brandon has it where an arbitrator may be able to fire him,
Yeah, they
which
have some
means that,
authority. Yeah.
yeah, which means that it won't be a transparent process anymore. But it happens. Things happen to us,
Hmm.
but not the type of violence that you think. We get beaten, we get snatched out of cars, thrown onto cars. One of the women who was a part of the Campbell plaintiffs, who are the coalition of community groups that sued for the consent decree,
Hmm.
lost her child, in an encounter with a police officer. So, a lot of things happen to us. It's just that it's not spoken to as much as it is, because people think, one, that police violence is shootings and killings, but they don't realize how many people they shoot and don't kill. They don't realize how many people they beat. They don't realize how many people they neglect and let die in jails. They don't realize how many people they rape, and how many people, and that they, their own families, how many of them are beating their wives and killing their wives at home. They just don't take all those things into consideration because, for some reason, we don't think police are people and human beings, and they don't do those things, and they absolutely do. One of the things that we talked about internationally, as a matter of fact, was military rape, um, and violence in the military, gender based violence in the military. And 20% of police officers are recruited from the military. So they're coming from these violent, rapist culture
Hmm.
into, civilian life, which is one reason why it's militarized as well, right? So yeah, so it happens to us a lot. It's just that we don't talk about it enough. And Jeanette Young,
And Jeanette Young, yeah.
yeah, so Betty Jones answers the door, gets shot and killed, so it's happening. It's just that, we are quicker to get on the street. 25 million people will get on the street for George Floyd before they'll get on the street for Breonna Taylor.
It's true. We
Mhm.
saw it.
Yep.
You mentioned in the bio, it was mentioned, and I'm just curious out of my own curiosity. You can go back 200 years for your family tree.
Yeah, that's a combination of DNA and stories, the
Oh,
oral
through the
history.
family. Okay.
Yeah. So I can trace through ancestry back to 1801, somewhere around there, early 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
But through DNA, I can get back to the 1700s.
And what's your origin? Where are you from?
Chicago.
No, but your origin when you go back to the 1800s or so.
Oh, okay. So our family story was the first woman over on the boat. Got with a indigenous man.
Indian. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we had that pop up, and it was like 1%, so trace amount.
Mm-hmm.
And trace means it goes back 17 generations, so that's 20 years, so that's 140 years.
Is that what trace means when they say trace? Oh, okay.
Good. Yeah, well, 1% trace is 7 generations, then you have 2% and 3%,
mm-hmm.
and it goes on, so you have to see what your generation is. But 7 generations is 140 years, and because it was in my great aunt and she was born in 1919, then 147 times 20, right? 140.
Mm-hmm.
140 years puts us into the 1700s.
Wow. That is that. I thought that was cool. I'm just saying that was.
Yeah, I thought it was cool too, because when I went, oh wow, this is the story.
Yeah,
that's the story. The story is in our blood. I said, okay. So because you never know if the stories are true.
I know, but you hear them, but you don't know. But that just legitimizes it. That's
yeah, it did. It was like, well, okay, that one's probably true.
You also mentioned something interesting, because I think they had a movie about Billie Holiday, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And I think it opened up a whole can of worms. So I thought that was interesting that you guys are actually checking into that, because they literally said that they just had her at the bed, chained up, and just let her die, basically, withdrew medicine and everything.
Well, there was some torture involved
in the hospital.
Yeah.
I thought they just let her die. Okay.
Yeah, they lied on her. There's this guy, I think it's Ainslinger or something who's supposed to be the racist. They said he was so racist that racists were like, oh my God.
He made Wallace look tame.
So he was mad at her. People don't realize that Billie was an activist.
Yeah,
right?
From what they saw, yeah.
So people don't realize that when she sang Strange Fruit, they hated her for that.
And I really don't get why they hated it. That's exactly what was going on then.
Because she was talking about lynching.
But that's exactly what was going on then.
They wanted to keep lynching people with no, with impunity, like they do, like they said that the bullet from the police's gun has replaced the rope. So they wanted to keep on lynching people, and she was singing about it. And, everybody thinks she wrote it. She didn't write it. But she sang it, and he hated it. He arrested her. He came in, shut down places. And so he was over what is now the DEA. Okay. So Billie, I think personally that he got Billie hooked on some heroin, because remember she had that agent. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he sicked this agent on her. And I think that he got her, like pure heroin, because Billie was, if you look at her picture, she goes back and forth between being thin and kind of heavy, and thin and heavy. And all of a sudden she's just thin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So she goes into the hospital. She actually is talking to her friends. Everybody is coming by. They're sending her flowers and they're bringing her cards. And she's on methadone. Okay. And she's getting plumped up again, right? Because she's getting treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly, I believe that this is a complete lie because they found $750 in her stocking when she died. But they said that they found heroin on her. And I'm like, well, if you found heroin on her, why didn't you find the $750 that was in stocking as well? Right. So
Mm-hmm.
I know that that's a lie, that they did not find any heroin on her. So at that point, they chained her to the bed and they took all her flowers. They took all her cards out of the room. They put a guard at the door and they stopped giving her methadone.
Oh my! They stopped the methadone.
Yes.
Oh my gosh!
So they killed her. So I can imagine Billy not being able to get out of the bed to go to the bathroom. She told her friends she thought that they were going to kill her. She said, they're going to kill me. So I can just imagine her, being tortured, not being able to get out of the bed, not having people come to visit her, not having, anything in her room is stripped bare. And this man is just waiting until she dies
That's
because
it.
he hated her in particular, and he hated jazz musicians too. So I believe that Billie Holiday was the first drug assassination, war on drugs assassination, and a lot of people, and she's not given her props as an activist. There's a
She
picture
never
of
was.
Billy. There's a picture of Billy with African earrings. And you talking about 1940 something.
Wow! Right.
So
That's right.
so Billy was cutting edge way back, and they didn't make the movie about Billy cutting edge activist who was, murdered by the government. They
Well, they
made a
touched on
movie.
it. They did touch on it. They did touch.
I think it was a little bit too much about her being a sexual being.
Yeah,
Um,
they
that,
focused on that and the drugs.
yeah, than it
Definitely.
was her being an activist and a virtuoso. And tortured and assassinated. Yeah, they didn't deal with that at all.
Now let's go to the filmmaker. Now you've entered a whole new realm. Now you're a filmmaker. Now tell us how this came about.
Well, Poetic Justice, Martinez, who is responsible for the campaign for justice for Rukia, we just tagged along and supported like we do as an organization. Um, Martinez was a rapper. And because we get to know, we don't live by the normal nonprofit model.
Mhm.
And that's that you have a revolving door. And so, as soon as a certain amount of time goes by, you're out. We're more family because we get to actually pick who we want to support. And they pick us. So I found out that he rapped, and so we created a poetry slam, Poetic Justice.
Okay.
And we had two. We had one at Margaret Burroughs' first place outside of her home,
Hmm.
the Southside
In
Arts.
Bronzeville.
Yeah, in
Hmm.
Bronzeville. So we had the first one there. It was really nice. And then we had the second one with Good Kids Mad City. So we were doing the third one, but it was during COVID, and it was at the height of COVID. you
Oh,
know,
when
so
everybody was in the house.
exactly. And it was like, can we get people out to
Yeah.
do this? And so I said, you know what? I called up one of my friends, Leah Gibson, who is an associate professor at the School of the Art Institute. And she hooked me up with one of the curators at the Jane Addams Hull House Museum. And he said, well, you can have the museum, you can film in the museum. So we got some old and new folks together and we filmed them. And then this guy ran off with our film, which happens in filmmaking.
I was going to say, or they never have your film, or it's not done, then they lose it. Ugh.
Okay, it's really interesting how it happens, and everybody tells me you got to stop being so trusting. And I'm like, that's something that I can't do, so I guess I'm just gonna have to build in, getting duped. But so we had to refilm some stuff. Is that me? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's what I was looking at. I don't know.
Yeah, it's I got this one clock that I don't know how to turn off.
Oh, no worries.
But so we decided to film it, and because we had to refilm certain performances, we ended up in a studio. And once we were in the studio, I just decided to have the boys, because his sons wrote something about their aunt, who was Rakia.
Okay.
A piece called Traumatized. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, let's I gotta plug my phone in. Let's do this. Let's have them talk about the piece. And so I had them talk about the piece. And then I said, well, why don't you and I, Martinez, speaking to Martinez, why don't you and I talk about the campaign? So I then said to the editor, what I want to do is I want to build on your art as an editor, your artistry as an editor. And I want it to feel as if people are walking through a gallery of performances, right? So when you see it, each performance is different.
Okay.
So the point is for you to feel as if you're going from one piece, like if it's an art piece, to another art piece, to another art piece. And in between, we have the documentary. Okay. And so that's why I call it docu-art.
Docu-art, okay.
Yeah. And we're going to do another one called Gospel. And we already have 2 of the performances filmed, and so we just have to get the other performances filmed and the documentary part of it, and I'll keep doing it until it catches on.
So where do you show this at? Do you have any place that you display it?
Well, we just came from the La Femme Film Festival, where it was
that at? Where was the film?
That was in LA. So it premiered actually in LA on LA. Yeah, it premiered in LA at the Regal Cinema on a big screen.
Oh, that's big time.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting.
Wow.
And we've won. We were quarterfinalists in her film festival, I think it's, and then we got selected for another one where they were going to give us feedback on the film.
Okay.
And then we won World Cons, the best ensemble. And so we're still out there looking at the different film festivals. We haven't gotten selected in Chicago yet.
So, it's hard. This is a tough market. You know that. It's hard. It's easier somewhere else than here.
I'm like, this is about us.
I know, but maybe the gospel one. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that one. That'll be the one that gets selected.
But LA, that's a big market.
It was exciting. It was really exciting to see it on the big screen, and I was really proud of that one. Yeah.
And did you have so your role in it was kind of creative content? What was your role?
A director, producer.
Oh,
so, Women's All Points Bulletin wanted to create a film. It was called Unjustified. And we wanted to create that in 2014 at the height of the police violence movement. Mm-hmm. But once again, the problems with the folks that you work with. So what ended up happening is that we did this instead. you know. But as a part of that, we were trying to connect with young women of color who wanted to be in film.
Oh, good.
And so we wanted to create a film because I come from Corliss,
Uh,
my
on the south side. Yeah. Okay.
CPS, right? So they had a radio TV film, they had a studio and all that. So
Oh,
I was like, you know what, this is an opportunity for the kids, to for us, one, to take advantage of Corliss's high school's resources, right, to contribute to their resources, right, but also, my thing is that, we tell our kids, um, learn a trade so you can get a job, and my thing is learn a trade so you can be your own boss, right? You don't have to always tell our kids that the only way to go is to, into wage slavery, right? You can
yeah.
try to do some things on your own. And so I believe that we have a lot of untapped talent in our schools and our children. And we need to tap into that talent and see how we can lift them, for them to be artists and for them to start creating, and doing things that are in industries that we are not in, that we need to be in, and we need to have some control in as well. And we all know that women, a black man to get in, and then, here we come, so a
Yeah.
lot of times it's us first, but you don't know about us.
Right.
you know, but we really want to support women in every way we can, and we also want to support young women.
That's beautiful. Wow.
Yeah,
You have done. You are doing so much. You're doing so much.
yeah.
What would you tell the younger you? I don't know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. What would you tell her?
Ooh, the younger me 10 years ago. Wow, 10 years ago. You know, mm, I would tell her to be prepared to be disappointed. 10 years ago, personally disappointed. I would tell her, prepare for that. You know, um, the one very young. It was really interesting because I came when I was 28 years old. I was kind of doing nothing. And my aunt, I walked into my grandmother's house and my aunt was there, her sister.
Mhm.
And she said, Krista, what do you want to be? And I said, what do you mean? What do I want to be? And she's like, what do you want to be? And I was like, Auntie, I don't know. It's been a little while. I don't know. I'm kind of
You haven't thought about it, yeah.
flailing in the wind a little
Yeah.
bit. And she says, well, I thought you wanted to be a producer.
Wow.
And I said, I told you that? She said, yes, you told me you wanted to be a producer.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. So I would tell her that you are going to produce, and to stay on track, and just believe, I honestly believe, even though what happened to me was the worst thing that has ever happened in my life, and it threw me so far off um, track as far as who I was, where I was, how I felt about my place in this country, how I felt about everything that I had been doing in my life up until that point, to, not necessarily assimilate because I was born an American, but, to be a part of the American dream, and to have it so easily snatched from me, you know. I would tell her, that it's okay. It's okay. You're gonna come out on the better side of this.
Hmm.
Because in all my jobs, everybody was telling me, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here. You're either too good for them, or you're too creative for them, or you're too smart for them, or you're too this for them.
Hmm.
And I was always a radical at a job anyway. So, yeah, I got in trouble for protecting Black women against silliness and stuff. So I was always doing radical stuff. I just tell her to hold on. Everything's gonna be okay, and to continue going through the doors that open for you,
Hmm.
and don't worry so much, because your path sometimes is chosen for you, and you'll know it by the doors and the opportunities that open for you. And so I know that this path, because of the doors and the opportunities that have opened for me, is the path that I was meant to be on. So I had to go through some pain, like many of us do. I had to I had to tap into that spiritual. I had to do research, had to get a better understanding of all kinds of different things, but it's led me to this place, and it's not a bad place.
It's a
Not a
great
bad.
place. I mean, and this, it feels to me that it's just really opening up. Yeah, with this first film, this is really good. It's really good to be in LA market as far as the film fest, but this is just starting to open up. And in my opinion, I know back in 2009 that was the worst thing that could have happened. That was horrific. But it almost seemed like that is how the door opened for you to get where you're at now. It's just weird how life is. It's just weird.
It is, and that's true, but it's also the fight and the spirit, and I don't know where I get that from. I
You
may
got
have
that anyway. That's innate. That's
I
you have that
may
anyway.
get that from my grandfather or something.
Yep.
He was excited. So, yeah, the courage,
Yeah.
you know, to
Absolutely.
to to step out and not to let it happen. And I think that's how we get people to come to trust us and let us help them as far as Women's All Points Bulletin is concerned,
So
because
I have one
we're
last question.
courageous.
If
Hmm.
someone was in trouble right now, or if something happened to someone right now, a young woman right now, how would they get in touch with All Points Bulletin? How would they get in touch with your organization?
We have a 800 number,
Okay.
8 833-933 WAPB, which is 9
800-833-933.
WAPB, which I believe is 9272.
Okay.
Um, and we're a boutique shop, so we don't take everyone,
Right.
but
Right.
we're willing to listen and talk, and see what we can do in order to help you navigate and understand just exactly what's happening to you. We're better and stronger in Chicago than we are in other cities, because Chicago has multiple layers. We have the consent decree, and we're one of the organizations that works on that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there are things that we may not be able to help you with, but we can definitely see whether or not they're being addressed in the consent decree and in policies. And because we're sitting at the table as far as policies that are written for the consent decree, we can, try to push those things. So if there's something that I don't know, and I know a lot, but if there's something, I have to admit that. If there's something that I don't know, like we missed when we were in Geneva this month, we missed college rape, you know. So if there's something that we miss, that we need to understand, that, if a woman wants to say that the police didn't respond to me this way, and we need to address that. We're always looking for women to testify before the judge. We have um, every 6 months you can testify before the federal judge, as far as the consent decree is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can get you in front of a judge to tell your story. You get 3 to 5 minutes to tell a judge what happened to you as far as how a Chicago police officer treated you. Now, one important thing to note is that the Chicago Police Department trains every single police officer in the state of Illinois. The first 600 hours of training is made by the Chicago Police Department. So we are working on their training, especially the first 600 hours, because they affect every single police officer in the state of Illinois. So we're always looking for women to testify to how they were treated by a cop, even if it's during a traffic stop and he didn't do anything but proposition you and you thought that that was wrong, or he called you a name, or he broke into your house, and anything. The one thing that you can be sure of is that we are a safe space, so you don't have to worry about telling us, because we're not going to tell anybody unless you let us. And if you let us, we can do whatever you want to do, and try to do our best to help you on your road to recovery.
All right. It has been a pleasure meeting you, and you've given me so many nuggets that I didn't even know. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. This was really good. And when you do the next one, when you finish the next one, the gospel one, please let us know.
Oh yeah.
Would love to also see little snippets of it too. Okay, I'm pushing it, I know. But anyway.
What, little snippets of the one that we got, or the one that we're
either one, just little, like, oh,
I can send you stuff.
Yeah, I would love to see so it's been a pleasure. Best of luck, and I can't wait till you get in the Chicago, when Chicago, one of their film fests, say, come on, do this here. That'll be
I'm hoping that this little stuff that we're doing now with you and others, and that it'll push it and get it, out there, so that people in Chicago will say, maybe we need to look at that.
Yeah, maybe Chicago needs to start supporting Chicago more anyway.
I know. And Black women need to support Black women, and women need to support women. The funny thing is we get supported more by women's film festivals than we do any other.
I believe it. I believe that. So it has been a pleasure. If you have anything that you want to tell the listening audience, keep in mind, even though this is the broadcast, this rebroadcasts like in perpetuity on different platforms. So if there's something that you want to say, please say
it. Just thank you, Janice. That's all. Thank you so much for
giving. It has been my pleasure. You have so many nuggets. I mean, wow. Like you said,
stay in touch so I can tell you
Absolutely. Absolutely. Take care and have a good evening for the listening audience. You guys have a blessed week. Stay healthy. And I'll be back next Sunday at 6 p.m. on Intellectual Radio, Voices of Change. Be blessed.